Ice is nature's great preservative. When we buy groceries, we put them in the freezer because we know they'll last longer when they've been frozen over. We've found shipwrecks, fossils, and animal remains preserved in ice for thousands of years, almost perfectly protected from the passing of time. With cryogenic freezing, it's possible that human beings will one day be able to sit out eternity. That's for the future, though. Right now, we have this fantastic video of incredible things that have been found in ice. When you go on a polar expedition, not everything you take with you makes it back. If you're unlucky, you might not even make it back yourself. Sir Ernest Shackleton did safely return from a trip to the South Pole in 1907, but he left some truly spectacular whiskey behind him. Over a century later, it's now been found, and apparently, it tastes fantastic. The bottles of McKinley's rare Old Highland malt were a personal favorite of the famous explorer, but he had to abandon them when he aborted his mission in 1909. A century of snow and ice settled over the top of them, but a research team in New Zealand located them after a painstaking operation. After being slowly and delicately thawed out in Scotland, one of the 10 bottles has been opened and poured. If any whiskey connoisseurs happen to be watching this, we're told it's mellow, fruity, and light. It turns out that almost nothing that's lost in the Antarctic stays lost forever. Another priceless relic of over a century ago has recently been rediscovered and thawed out, and this time, it's a journal. Specifically, the journal is the property of George Murray Levick, who was part of the doomed Terra Nova expedition led to the South Pole by Robert Scott in 1910. Levick was one of the lucky ones. He escaped from the mission with his life, but only after spending a winter hiding out in an ice cave and eating penguin meat to survive. It's not known when Levick dropped the journal, but the entries in it capture happier and more hopeful times during the early part of the expedition, during which everyone expected their travels to end successfully. The journal was discovered inside an ice case, revealed by melting snow close to Cape Evans during the most recent summer. You don't tend to think of valleys as existing in Antarctica, but that doesn't mean that they aren't there. We know they exist, and they're absolutely huge. Scientists have recently discovered not just one, but 3 massive valleys underneath the icy surface of the land, connecting the West Antarctic ice sheet and the East Antarctic ice sheet together. The newly found features have been named Foundation Trough, Offset Rift Basin, and Patuxent Trough. Foundation is the largest of them by far, with a length of 217 miles and 22 miles wide. All 3 of the valleys function as highways for the ice, allowing it to flow from the relatively stable sheet of ice on the east and shore up the less stable western sheet. None of the 3 had ever been noted or recorded until 2019 because of satellite blind spots caused by the orbit of ice mapping orbiters. Out of sheer curiosity, scientists flew specially equipped planes over the blind spots last year to see if they were missing anything. The discovery of the valleys was their reward. It's not just the land below the Antarctic that's recently been giving up its secrets. We've discovered a lot more about what lies beneath the ice of the Canadian Arctic, too. A PhD student named Anja Rudehauser was conducting a project to analyze the bedrock below Nunavut, Devon Island in early 2018 when he spotted an unusual radar reflection coming from the ice cap on a recent survey. Usually, such a reflection would suggest liquid water, but the ice cap on Devon Island is over a quarter of a mile thick and 13 degrees below freezing. The existence of liquid water shouldn't have been possible. The only possible explanation was that the water was incredibly salty and ran a long way deep below the surface. Anja theorized that salt from the bedrock was being leached by the mineral halite and melting the ice directly above it, thus creating a salt lake that's sealed off from the rest of the world. Scientists believe that this may be how liquid water exists on Jupiter's moon, Europa, meaning that land below Canada's ice is like an alien world. Although dinosaurs get most of the headlines, they weren't the only giant animals who roamed the face of the earth in prehistoric times. There were also saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths. Sadly, the huge but cute-looking mammoth didn't survive into the modern human era, but we still occasionally find the remains of them encased deep inside the ice. A complete female mammoth body was recently found in the Lyakovsky Islands in Siberia, Russia. Not only is the skeleton complete, but flesh, muscle, and fur were still attached to the body. What makes the find all the more remarkable is that the flesh was so well preserved that the muscle tissue is still red, as if it were fresh meat. The lower half of the mammoth was found trapped inside totally pure ice, with the upper half having lain in the tundra for thousands of years. It's not known how the mammoth died, but the fact that the trunk was found some distance from the carcass suggests it may not have been a natural end. Antarctica hasn't always been a frozen wasteland. In the distant past, it was a verdant oasis, perfect for sustaining life. We know that because we occasionally find the fossils and remains of prehistoric creatures there, including a recently discovered new subspecies of dinosaur, a type of archosaur. The creature was about the size of an iguana and would be considered an ancestor to modern crocodiles. It was carnivorous and would have survived by eating mammals and amphibians. In honor of the legendary explorer we mentioned earlier on, this 250 million-year-old species has officially been named Antarctinax shackletoni. Researchers are now having to think again about the diversity and spread of early Earth creatures. As Africa and Antarctica were once joined together, it's always been assumed that the animals that lived on the land back then would be similar. As no creature anything like this crocodile precursor has ever been discovered in Africa, that may not have been the case after all. Newspapers in the United Kingdom got very excited earlier this year when the fossil of a gigantic sea creature was discovered in Antarctica. They thought it might be a relative of the fabled Loch Ness Monster. The 70-million-year-old remains belong to an elasmosaur and represent the largest sea dinosaur ever found. It's also one of the most complete ancient reptile fossils of any description ever located. When it was alive, this humongous creature would have weighed around 15 tons and measured 40 feet in length. Despite their fearsome size, they probably wouldn't attack ships and boats if they were still alive today. Their diet was primarily made up of mollusks and crustaceans. Relatively speaking, this particular elasmosaur was a latecomer to the dinosaur party. It lived and died a mere 30,000 years before the mysterious mass extinction event that wiped dinosaurs from the face of the planet. Although it looks a little like the standard image of the Loch Ness Monster, it can't be the same species. Loch Ness was only formed 10,000 years ago, long after the dinosaurs were gone. The wreckage of the Pegasus isn't so much a find from the ice as something that's been committed to the ice and then left there. You have to look hard if you want to see it. It's a white plane embedded in a snowy, icy white terrain around New Zealand's McMurdo Station. Pegasus is a C-121 Lockheed Constellation plane that crashed as it came in to land at the station in October 1970. The force of the crash was so severe that it ripped away the landing gear and shattered the exterior paneling at the base of the plane. And yet somehow the crew walked away with only minor injuries. As the plane was half buried in a mound of ice some distance from the runway, it was decided that a salvage mission wasn't warranted. The aircraft was likely damaged beyond use, and so risking a life and limb to dig it out wasn't worth it. It's now become a landmark. In fact, it gave its name to the nearby Pegasus Airfield. Einar Ambach is a reindeer hunter by trade. He doesn't know much about archaeology, but he knew the enormous sword he found 5,000 feet above sea level on a mountain in the south of Norway was probably historically significant, so he took it to the experts. They confirmed his suspicions. The sword is 1,100 years old and once belonged to a Viking warrior. How it got there is another question. No Viking sword has ever been found at such an altitude before. The warrior race has never been thought of as particularly proficient climbers. We have the altitude to thank for the excellent preservation of the sword. Up there where the air is thin and the ice covers the surface, the rust and rot process happens much more slowly. For most of each year, it would have been encased in ice, and even during warmer months, it was surrounded by freezing scree. The most likely explanation for its presence is that it belonged to a Viking warrior who became lost in the mountains and died there, although the lack of any other artifacts nearby is a little strange. This wall of frozen fish in South Dakota, USA looks like an art exhibition. If only it were anything so lovely. The real story behind it is a little more grisly than that. The thin sheets of ice contain a variety of fish species, such as carp, which are native to the area. The fish are long dead. They died when ice formed over the surface of Lake Andes and prevented sunlight reaching algae in the water. Without algae, no oxygen was produced. Without oxygen, the fish suffocated. Once the fish were dead, they floated to the surface. Then the plunging temperatures froze the water on the surface and pushed it towards the shore, creating the fishy ice walls. It's an unpleasant tale, although if the local residents are to be believed, the story isn't as unpleasant as the smell. Fortunately, they didn't have to worry about that for very long. Bald eagles, American crows, and other birds were quick to spot the easy meals and flew in to take them away as the ice thawed. Perhaps one of the most remarkable sets of frozen animal remains ever found is the Yukagir bison, a mummified 9,000-year-old bison that was discovered by a North Siberian tribe in the lowlands of Yana Indigirka back in 2011. The cadaver was in such good condition that experts were able to perform almost a complete autopsy on it and discovered much about the steppe bison, which is a direct relative of the bison that still exist on Earth today. Even the bison's brain had survived the freezing process to the point where the team was able to perform a CT scan on it as easily as if it had died the previous week. The heart, blood vessels, and digestive system of the bison also have survived the full 9,000 years, although some of the other internal organs have undergone dramatic shrinkage. After studying the creature's anatomy, the scientists came to a conclusion about the manner in which its life came to an end. There was a distinct lack of fat around the bison's abdomen, so it almost certainly starved. Dog lovers may want to brace themselves, because the Yukagir bison isn't the only well-preserved animal to be retrieved from the ice of Siberia. There's also the Tumat puppy. This cadaver is even older than the bison and lived somewhere around 12,400 years ago. It may look like a household pet, but it doesn't correspond to any species currently known to exist on Earth. So it's presumed to be an extinct form of canine. That might not be the case for long, though. Scientists say that the body is in such good condition, they may be able to resurrect the species using cloning technology. As was the case with the bison, the creature's brain is mostly unharmed by its years of ice entombment. Its teeth are in excellent condition too, and it looks like it would be capable of giving you quite a nasty bite if it needed to. Based on its size and the development of its organs, scientists believe the dog was young, possibly only a puppy. Perhaps it was a companion animal for a long-forgotten early human family. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.